Hi there and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm doing a hair tutorial, which is something slightly different than what I usually do. But I've been for years now getting comments saying, I love how you draw hair so good, how do you do it? Like, people didn't specifically request this tutorial, but when I asked on my stories on Instagram if they wanted to see a hair tutorial, it was like an immediate yes. Like, everyone voted yes. And I was like, all right, so people do want to see how I draw hair, how I do it. I'm gonna try. I'm not really used to explaining everything I do, and sometimes I get a bit out of topic, so I hope I can do this properly and show you a couple of things, because there's definitely a couple of things that helped me a lot right when I started. The thing is, I love drawing hair. I enjoy it a lot. So, of course, I put a lot of time into drawing hair, and of course that helps. So, I didn't draw hair perfectly right off the bat, but I enjoyed it a lot, so I put a lot of time into it. And every time I draw hair, I sort of enjoy it, so I, spend my time with it. I give it time, and that's also a reason why my hair looks best. But I didn't start it this way. In fact, I'm going to show you a couple of old drawings where I drew hair specifically in a way that I'm going to tell you not to in a minute, and how I draw hair now. So I'm going to show you some pics around here. And this tutorial is not specific for any level, really. I'm just gonna give you the tips I have on drawing hair, and it's not for in any specific style. So for example, if you're seeing my art, you might realize that my art is a bit more stylized, but these tips will help you with realism as well, because when I first learned this, for example, the initial tip I'm giving you, I was doing realism and it worked for me and it helped. So just keep that in mind. So I have my tablet down here and I'm gonna explain while I draw. It's hard for me to draw and talk, so I'm hoping to do my best. But if you're left with any questions, please leave it in the comments. I'm gonna be glad to answer them. And if anything else is not properly explained in this video, I'll try to make another one in the future. So let's get to it. Alright, so first things first, even before I start drawing, what you need to realize first is that hair isn't just one hair alone. You have multiple hairs, and if you actually grab one hair, let me actually do it. If you grab just one hair, see, you almost can't see it on camera. If you see it from further away, you can't see it. So drawing individual hairs is actually nonsense. And if you grab any piece of hair like this, and even a thin one, if you grab this thin strand of hair, it's probably composed by 50 hairs or more. There's a ton of hairs here. So drawing hair by hair won't get you anywhere. It will be very messy, it will be very time consuming, and it won't be realistic because hair moves in masses. You have to start thinking about hair as a mass, not as individual hair strands. And this is the main thing you need to learn and you need to get into your head for actually drawing realistic hair. And this can be more stylized, less stylized, but the thought of hair into masses is what's going to help you draw good hair. So we have our screen here, and the first thing I'm gonna show you is the first trick I learned. And this can be applied both to realistic, as I said, or stylized drawing. Now, let's talk about the mass of hair. Now, what I don't want you to do is fill the hair like this, because this thing here doesn't really have any real hair structure. It doesn't have any light, it doesn't have anything. Hair reflects light as any other mass. I'm gonna change my brush. By the way, brushes are not really important here because, as I said, this applies to anything. Pencil or marker, whatever you're using, this could be used in any way. So let's draw this hair strand again, all right? We have this as a strand of hair. As you can see, the strand, it's thinner here and here. So the hair will compress here, and here will be wider. Let's apply a source of light right there in the middle, okay? So what we're gonna do is actually shade one corner in there, and the other corner in there, leaving some parts completely white in the middle. So once you have this, you can see we're talking about a mass, a form. Like, you now think of this more as a sphere maybe than an actual strand of hair. And this is what I meant when I'm talking about do not think of individual hair strands. So now if you want to make it look more realistic, I'm actually going to do this in another layer just in case, is draw hairs on top of it. But not like a bunch of hair like there, but just like a few. Like this. Soft. And then on the other direction as well. And as you go for this, you can, if you want to make it a bit more realistic, maybe grab another color and add some more strands. Maybe you will want to grab a highlight and actually do it the other way around. You know, play a bit with it. So yes, we're doing some line. I think you can see that we're talking about a big mass of hair. And this looks much more realistic than that is here. Now, if you were working with pencil, what I will say is do the shape, and then this you can blend with a blender or just with a soft shading, and then add some lines in pencil and then, you know, blend them again, because that will definitely help. Now you can see both of them. And you can compare and see that this is much more realistic. This actually looks like hair if you were grabbing a hair in this shape. Now, of course, this isn't exactly a hairstyle. So now I'm going to talk about how to apply this into hair. But I think that this is the starting point that could definitely help you see anything else. Now, the second important thing when you're talking about hair is to understand that our hair isn't directly getting out of our face, is on our skull. And yes, this might seem very basic, but there's a lot of people drawing hair like this and forgetting this part of the head exists. And we have a skull there. So let's get back. So you have to take into account the shape of the head to actually draw the head. And the shape of the head actually will give the shapes that you're searching for to do things like this in the actual hair. So I'm gonna try different hairstyles and I'm gonna tell you and show you how I approach them. I don't really have a trick for anything. I basically apply this sort of principle to anything else and I adapt it to the hairstyle I want to do. So first of all, I'm gonna do a straight hair with bangs because I think, you know, bangs are complicated for some people, so I'm gonna quickly draw that and show you. So first of all, if you're gonna apply hair in a skull like this, you need to know that there's this sort of line where hair starts. You know, you can exaggerate this in different ways depending on the stylization, but you should keep that in mind. I don't use the guidelines anymore, but it's there, you know? And by the way, I know these heads aren't exactly the best heads ever, but I drew them quickly just for you as an example. And as the head is not the important part here, I didn't care much about the specific details. So we're gonna do this straight hair first. For that, I'm gonna draw a general shape. I'm gonna do it maybe a bit short because it will apply in me. Let's make it shorter. Let's make it a bit of a bob. And let's give it some bangs. So you see, I'm not drawing the hairs, but I'm drawing it in sections. I'm grabbing this part here as one section. And this part here is another section. What I'm doing here is I'm gonna add a highlight. Like, hair is always reflecting light. There's always a highlight in our hair. And in straight hair specifically, the highlight is much more pronounced. So I'm gonna add a highlight around here and around here. This hair isn't exactly straight like this. It's actually shaping like this over the hair. If light was hitting this in the middle here, then we'll have a portion of light here and it will darken over the sides. This is what I'm gonna do here, just really quickly so you could understand. Now, let's get back to our hair. So I'm gonna apply the same principle as before. I'm gonna make my brush a bit larger and with soft strokes, just apply the shade. And another important thing when you're drawing hair is actually go in the direction of the hair with your brush. Sort of helps creating that effect. There I wasn't going with the flow, but I wanted to darken this bit. I'm gonna add some lines in here and then on the other direction. Now, if we want more detail, if we want it more realistic, then of course we'll grab a smaller brush. Now, if we want more detail, if we want it more realistic, then of course we'll grab a smaller brush. and start adding some lines. And as you can see with this style, it already looks sort of realistic hair there. You don't really need that many lines, but I think the lines are definitely giving it an extra touch of realism. And again, as I did before, if you wanted to make it more realistic, of course, you will have to mix a bit more color and such to actually make it real. In my case, I actually work with line art most of the time, so I will do like certain shapes in line art and then fill it up with color. But you can see now that if we don't really see, let me erase this bit right here for you to see. If we see it like this, the hair looks pretty well. You can see the shape, you can see two distinct shapes, how light hits it, and you can see his hair, even though we didn't draw a lot of strands making the hair. We just added a few lines up here, a few lines down there, and it works. And you know, the simplification can even go larger than this. A lot of people don't, these lines are much thicker and they just modify it to their style and it works for them. I'm gonna put these lines back in case we need the head again. One trick that always makes hair more realistic is to add hairs like stranding out of the hair. So for example, if you look at me right now, my hair isn't exactly plopped down. We have like small strands of hair getting out, and this sort of messy thing actually makes hair realistic, because even if you're super styled, your hair will have certain strands of hair around that will do things like this. It's just basically impossible not to. So my trick is to make the brush thinner, and after I finish, sometimes even in another layer, I add some hairs like this. So maybe I'm exaggerating a bit here, but you know, you will add some hairs like this over on the hairstyle and around here. And I'm lowering the opacity a bit now because I don't want them to be so bright, but as you can see, it sort of looks much more realistic with the hairs than without them. Alright, so back to it. In this head, I'm gonna draw wavy hair. With this, I'm gonna try to explain how to make curls and waves seem realistic. There's all sorts of ways to draw wavy hair because, of course, it varies depending on people. For some people, my hair is wavy. From some others, my hair is curly, for example. So I'm gonna try to do a standard thing, and then I'm gonna draw curly, so don't worry if you're not fully satisfied. For this, I'm doing, again, like in big shapes. I would recommend you do this in softer, like larger brush sometimes, because it gives it a bit of flexibility. So I'm gonna do this. So the best way to go when your hair isn't exactly straight is to go a bit crazy, go with the flow and see where the lines take you. Like, don't be too rigid and don't be like, this is set in stone. Now let's make another layer and let's fill it up. And again, sections here. So I'm gonna again go with another brush and I'm gonna tell you about the sections over here. So for example, this part is straight and this part is straight too. For the lining, you will usually have to follow depending on where the light is. For example, if here the light was a bit higher, then you will put the highlight here. It will reflect in different ways in depending this scenario. So I'm gonna put a highlight over here, more or less, just explaining. And then I'm gonna treat these as strands, as different strands. So as you can see, when you add curly or wavy hair, you add different strands of hair, much more than if it's straight. This over here will be another strand, more or less. I'm making this up a bit because it just usually goes with the flow. And again, these parts will all work a bit like this. So here will be darker in all of them because it's thinner. And then in parts like this, it will have light. And this just goes with the flow, but you know, just have light so it makes the curl. If the light is going over here, then, you know, check out how it will look on a bigger curl like this. And the same goes on the other one. Like we have this strand over here So again, straight over here and here, like darker. Then we'll make curls. And of course, some hair will shade on others. So for example, if we have a curl here, this part will be slightly darker. So this is more or less the structure of what I'm gonna do. I hope it's somehow understandable. Now let's try and do it. I'm gonna ignore the ear bit, okay? But, because I just put it there for reference. So again, the direction is very important. Hair on here will definitely go down like this. As I said, if you think of hair as a mass, you have to think about where it falls and how it falls. If we have a straight line in the middle and the hair is falling down to the sides, of course it will sort of like curl around the head and move like this. So keep that in mind when you're drawing. Now let's start with this side. I'm gonna darken over here. I'm really used to doing this intuitively, so if you see that I'm doing something slightly different than what I just explained, just bear with me. If the light is hitting this curve like this, it will definitely have more light over here than over here. So it will be wider over here. Alright, so here we have the base. If you wanted not to make exactly thin strands, you could just go a bit thinner with this and, and fix the shadows a bit to make them more realistic, and, it will make it a bit better. Okay, so I'm gonna actually draw the little hairs as I showed you to finish this, because I don't want to spend too much time on every hair. I just want to explain you the basics about how it works. Occasionally you can have a strand of hair crossing over, it's fine, of course, it just makes it a bit more realistic. This is very casual for me, I don't know if you see it, but I'm like so relaxed drawing hair. I have fun because I sort of let it do its thing. Once you understand the basics, it's just easy to let it do its thing, really. And the highlights don't always have to be this bright, as I said, like for example here I think they will be darker. A good thing too to make this a bit more realistic is that when you're doing this strands, maybe you can change the size of the brush. I'm like just doing it in the same size and being very quick about it, but just so you know. And now as we have this, I will again add lines, as I said before, to make it more realistic. Maybe in straight hair, not as much, but when you're drawing curly, wavy hair, like the strands are so important. It's just like without it, it's not half as realistic as it would be with it. So add your loose hairs and don't be afraid of it. Just follow the shapes of the head and of the hair and you will be fine. So for example, it will be weird for me to add a hair like this. So just follow the shapes. Add some thinner, maybe some thicker, maybe some that will make a thicker strand. There we go. All right, so that's my wavy hair there. I've lost some footage. I drew this and this while I was recording, but not recording. I was recording the screen, but I wasn't recording the audio. So I'm going to show it as I talk. And I'm explaining actually how to do a curl shape, because some people find it complicated. I actually explain how to do curls with this sort of technique. When you draw a curl, you basically see this shape, right? But how do you draw that? So what I encourage you to do is draw it, but like very large. And of course you can make this much thinner. I've done curls like this in a shape that's basically a triangle like this. And it sort of looks like a curl when you finish, but that's very odd in that. But using the shape, I basically add larger shapes of this. You darken this part and you shade this. Again, we're just talking about big shapes as always. And when you shade this part and you keep it going, you basically have your curl. Now I'm gonna erase this because I already explained it in the back, but I'm keeping this one down here as an example for you to see while I'm working in case it helps. Now I already draw a loose shape for the hair, and what I talked about while I was drawing this is that the important thing when you're drawing curly hair is to let it loose, because curly hair is very unpredictable. Curly hair does its thing. Like, even when we know how to style it, curly hair will do his thing. So when you're drawing it, like, be very loose with your wrist, let it do just curls and shapes that sort of feel natural to you, and follow the shape of the head. So for example, of course, the curls will be born on the scalp and just sort of fall through. We have the shape, let's see how to approach it. Now, as we did before, I'm going to quickly explain the shapes again, as I was, but in here is going to be much more messier, so I'm not going to signal them all. And basically, after I do this shape, I just go with the flow and find them as I go. But for example, we will have a shape like this over here. So of course, it will be darker here, because there's a lot of hair stranded up there, and it will always be darker there. Then the curl here, I kind of turns, so it will be darker here as well. And just for the sake of keeping it natural, I will make it darker as well here. And I will lighten it over here to make a highlight over here and over here. And then darken it again over here. So as you see, I'm always applying the principle of darken, lighten to make it natural. And then on the rest of the other curls, I'm just gonna go with the flow and see what shapes I feel are natural. And if it's something like this, for example, this one will curl behind the head here. So this part will be dark. And in case like this, for example, over here, maybe too, it will be dark because it's curling inwards towards the hair. So stuff like that. And then over here, we'll just grab like small strands of hair like this and apply the same principles and keep doing it. I must say, this isn't exactly the kind of long curls as I was explaining here, but the principle is really the same, it's just they're not fully together. In fact, I'm gonna draw one over here now so I can do it for you to see. Here I'm not going with such a larger brush as I was before, because these are very much smaller sections. And I'm just going with the flow to add these shapes. Of course, when you work with a bit more colors for shading, some places will actually be darker with a darker color instead of you darkening it like this. But this is a good base for you to start. Now, I don't know how pleased you are with the results I'm getting, but I think it looks pretty nice so far. Now I'm just adding like different curls over here, doing its own thing because that's what curls do. I love drawing curly hair mainly because it's like unpredictable and you can just zone out, figure out what the curl is doing, but it does take a lot of time. Like, I think curly hair is the one that's most time consuming of all of them. I will highly recommend for you to use references when you're starting practicing and take a look and see if you can identify the strands of hair. Like I did with the wavy and straight hair, you will definitely have something to go on there. Okay, so I think I'm done with getting the shapes. Of course, for this hair, I will definitely go much smaller and try to detail the curls properly. Sometimes I will even outline the curls if I see that they got a bit, you know, missed with some of the curls to define them a bit more. Now with curly hair, as I said with wavy, curly and wavy hair are the most important when you're adding strands of hair. And in this case, you can actually go a bit crazy. It works, you know, because curly hair is crazy. Alright, so the two I have left and I want to show you is Afro Hair, because it's slightly different. Well, you can go into detail and do the curls like this, as I told you to, but I actually have a different technique now, because I think Afro Hair is a bit more about the volume than exactly drawing the individual strands of hair, like I showed you here. So I'm sort of a bit more abstract with Afro Hair. I love doing it, it's just super enjoyable, but I think that if you go on and draw every little curl, you go crazy. And the other one is like a ponytail or a braid or something like that. I just want to show you how to do it a bit. So with Afro, I honestly go even more with the flow than I do with curly hair, because again, it's a crazy hair, is like big, and like people can't really control it that much. So what I do is I grab a big brush and I do it with shapes. Sometimes if you have a texture brush, and I do shapes like this. Like I sort of decide the shape I want to do, but then I do shapes like this, you know? And then I add, of course, a curl here and there to make it more realistic, but that's more or less what I do. Okay, this doesn't make much sense. If you have a brush sort of like this, let me show you, that has a bit of texture, it might even be better because it looks so good when you're doing Afro hair. It looks like very realistic. So what I will do is, like, let's say I want to go and do, I want to do it a bit like this, like it's falling out. I'm sorry, the shape is very odd, but it's basically because I never draw it beforehand. I just go with the flow. But let's imagine that's the shape I want to. So I'll go with the big brush and I just fill it up. So what I will do here is sometimes I will I'll lower the opacity slightly, and then I'll go with the same brush but smaller and add curls. So my trick for doing curls is just like doing things like this. There are like small lines that seem like curls. They don't look like curls here, sorry. Let me try it again. I don't know if you can see it. Okay, you can't really see it properly here, but when you do it in the hair, it looks real. It looks like realistic. It's like you're doing this. But of course, if you do this, it doesn't look too realistic. So you're just doing the front part. That's a better way to explain it than what I was doing before. And then sometimes with a darker brush, I will go and do these sort of shapes over the hair to make it seem more real. And I love to add in the end like this sort of small strands falling out the hair. And okay, that's it. As I said, this is not my best take at Afro hair, but I hope you get the point. Let's change back to my previous brush. And I'm gonna do the quick attempt at a ponytail. Okay, so if you were doing a braid, I just want to explain this really quickly. Because a ponytail is actually pretty simple, but I just want to explain it just in case. But if you were actually doing a braid, you have to think about how you make a braid. If you're a man and you don't know how to make a braid, go look at it a bit, just quickly, or take a picture of a braid and try to see what's going on. But basically, a braid is made of three strands. Then there's more braids, of course, but it's basically made of three strands that interlace themselves. So one of the tricks I have for making a braid that usually works when I'm drawing is basically make a strand like this, just like I was drawing here, and a strand like this, and then put one over another. So this is very messy, okay, but you more or less get the point. Certain people just do like the heart, and it works for them, but I don't find it very realistic, because the point is to have three going on. Like, you have this one going in, you have this one going out, this one crossing over, then this one goes back here to then go back there, you know? So it's like you're taking into account three strands, not just one. When you see it like this, yes, it looks messy, but then you might just shape it a bit. So this one will obviously go on front, this one will go in the back, and this one crosses over. It's just taking into account how a braid works. These points will always be dark. Like the points where the things meet, just imagine them as this. Okay? And of course in here the same. So you will always shade them this way. Always following the direction. As always. Following the shape. Okay, so that was my quick braid tutorial that I hope helps. Just following the processes I did before and adding small strands and such will make the braid perfect after you work a bit more on that. If I was drawing it over here, I will sort of like make it big probably. You follow this as it was with straight hair, with the highlight like this here, and then you follow what I just explained here and make the braid. Now let's move on to the ponytail. With the ponytail you just have to follow the direction of the hair. So we have the borders of the hair over here, and ponytails might have loose strands, but let's just keep it right now as they don't. And then follow the shape of the head. So if this is the head, then the ponytail of course will more or less look like this. And let's say we have a high ponytail. So all the hair is pulled back, is pulled through here. So the direction we follow is this one. All the hair is pulling up. So the hair that's coming through here pulls back from here. And basically what you do here, maybe I should have put hair on a side profile, but it's the same. Like you shade back over here and you shade at the beginning over here. See, you leave sort of a highlight over here, like over the hair strands like this. So in this angle you can barely appreciate it. If I was working more into it, I will probably add some more highlights with another brush, but right now we're leaving it like this. And then the ponytail, like let's imagine we have it tied up here. The ponytail will usually go up and then down. So what you will see in an angle like this is a shape that goes up like this, and then a shape that goes down. You will have a sort of a highlight over there with a thin, darker border. And then here it just pulls down. Like if it was straight hair, maybe a bit darker in the back here because it's not receiving light there. So I know this looks very messy, but basically we have highlights over here, sometimes on top are a bit more pronounced. Then we basically have more highlights in the bottom, sort of in the middle bottom part. So that took a bit. You probably will be seeing it a bit shorter, but I don't know how long this video will be. So if you stick to the end, I hope it was super useful to you, because I think I've mentioned every trick I knew and I've explained my process as best as I could. I think the best way to explain things is while you're doing it, because it's when you realize how you do it. So hopefully seeing me do these different styles and explaining to you how I approach hair will help you get there. So after this, as I said, just practice, practice, practice. That's the best way to learn, as always. I will recommend you, as I said in the middle, in case you missed it, if you grab hair references and try to identify the strands of hair. It's much harder for curly hair, but you can still identify it. Maybe start with wider, more defined curls and then, you know, move along, because you might get crazy with it. Forget about single hairs unless it is for adding the single hair messy look. That's a point we all need to add. That was all. I hope you enjoy it. I hope it helps a lot. In case you have any doubt, please leave it in the comments so I can help you out as best as I can. I always respond to the comments, so if you leave me a comment, I'm sure I'm gonna respond to you. So give it a like if you enjoyed it, and if you want more content like this, if you want to see what else is on my channel, subscribe to the channel and check out the rest of my videos. I have a few for you to get entertained, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye!